Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Invoicing Made Easy, where we're going to talk about fixed price and time and material work that you have in your function point system. I still have a few people just trickling in, so we're going to give it another minute and then we'll get started. Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar here at Function Point, where we're going to talk about invoicing specifically related to your fixed price and time and material jobs. I am joined today by my absolutely lovely colleague, Jelena. She is a technical support advocate here at Function Point. I'm sure many of you have had an opportunity to chat with her whenever errors or issues pop up. So I'm very excited to have her join me. My name is Sophia Wilson. I'm the Customer Success Team Manager here at Function Point. Before we kind of get started on the agenda and a little bit of the content today, I just want to check in. Jelena, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear,
Okay,
and I see all
wonderful.
the screens.
All right, good. We're actually able to see my screen. I know last time I actually forgot to project that, so I'm glad that I did that right this time. Great. So going into our agenda, I'm going to do a quick, just basic invoicing overview, a little bit of definitions on the different types of invoices that live within Function Point. Then we're going to dive into just easy ways to utilize the system to be able to label your jobs for, say, your accountant and making sure that everything's prepared for invoicing time. And then we're going to go through different ways of batch invoicing, just again, to utilize those ways of labeling to make your invoicing easier day to day. If anyone has any questions as we're going through, you will notice the questions box that lives on your go-to control panel. Type those questions in. We want to hear them. Jelena will be answering those questions in the back end as we go through the webinar today. If there's anything relevant to what we're talking about that she thinks we should actually tackle on screen, she'll interrupt me. I'll also be checking in with her periodically to make sure that there isn't anything we should talk about. But if there is anything that's more use case specific to you and your agency, we may hold off and actually have your customer success manager reach out to you to help discover what maybe we need to specify just for your workflow. So please be patient with us with that. We'll make sure that we get all of your contact information so that that individual can be in touch with you. Learning more at FP. So obviously you guys are taking that first awesome step, which is joining us here at the webinar today. All of these webinars are recorded for you and will be available later on. So if there's anyone that you feel should have maybe participated today, the webinar recording will be available to you to share with them. That will be sent in your follow-up email. We also have lots of other tools available to you as well, and I'll make sure to point those out as we get into the system. And then, of course, this is an ongoing webinar series for you. We host these every other week on different topics, and our next one is going to be on February 20th, where we're going to talk about the QuickBooks integration and best practices related to that. Specifically, we'll be speaking more towards the QuickBooks Online, but please feel free to join. It's always a good one. Okay, let's get this out of the way and get started in the system. So like I was saying, I did just want to touch on some of the main areas of the system. Before we kind of get started on the actual creation of invoices, I really wanted to touch on just a couple of great ways of being able to label your jobs. So as you're first creating estimates within the system, you're going to notice this category drop down. And this is one that I always highly recommend to all of our customers to really utilize, because it allows you to label in what way you plan on invoicing these future jobs for yourselves. So I know that I work with a lot of agencies where maybe the accountant isn't actively in Function Point every single day. They really come in at month end to make sure that all invoicing is done and then properly transported over into QuickBooks. So this is just a really good and easy way of being able to notify and label your work for an accountant, or even maybe an account executive as they're managing jobs, to know how something needs to be invoiced. So a couple weeks ago, we did host our webinar specifically on retainers and recurring billing. So you'll notice that we have our monthly retainer options, quarterly retainer options, but the ones that we're going to be concentrating on today is just making sure that you are labeling those jobs in relation to time and material, as well as your fixed price work, so that you can invoice those accordingly. Some other items that I have noticed with agencies that I work with, they actually will utilize the job statuses. So if I navigate to a different job status here, and utilizing a status of, say, ready to invoice. So when you're using something like time material, of course, there's going to be someone who is always sort of monitoring that job and making sure that you're staying within budget on that, from what you've invoiced to now what your actuals are at. So this is a great way of being able to just quickly, again, signify to your accountant who's going to be coming in for invoicing time that this job has been reviewed and it is actually ready for invoicing. So it's just a great way of being able to move things from open into ready to invoice, so that they can pull an easy list at any time to pull that. And of course, just some examples of being able to do that. We will walk through those in just a few minutes. Now, what I want to do is just go through, again, just a basic add invoice, so that I can just kind of make some definitions on the different types of invoices for you within Function Point. So within your invoices, of course, you can add invoices at any point. You can do it just directly here from the job, add invoice. But for today, I'm going to just do an add invoice from our main navigation bar. And we're going to just choose retainer job. So when you come onto the Add Invoice page, you're going to see the three different types of invoices that we allow within the system. There's deposit invoices, interim invoices, and final invoices. How these are defined, deposit invoices actually have different functionality from the other two. Deposit invoices, we really only encourage you to use those if you're practicing proper accrual accounting and you want these deposits to transfer or communicate over into a liabilities or unearned revenue account within your QuickBooks accounts. Then, of course, you will be able to apply them to any interim or final invoice later, which will properly move them in your QuickBooks accounts. But that, of course, is more for our QuickBooks webinar than right now. But that is how that functionality works. An interim invoice is a pretty basic and most regularly used invoice here in Function Point. What this invoice will allow is really just the creation of an invoice, whether it's for a percentage of what you originally agreed upon, whether you're charging for all actuals that are against something. But really the key piece is that you can create one of these invoices at any point in the life cycle of an invoice, and it will still leave that job open for you to continue tracking more time material against that work. Where the final invoice is, although very similar to the interim invoice, where you can ultimately invoice whatever set amount it is that you're looking for, but it will actually close the job that invoice has attached itself to and not allow individuals to track any more time material against it. So just for today, we're going to create an interim invoice. Next, what we have is the invoice name. So this it will automatically just pull your job name for that example. Now, however, again, working with other agencies, I'll see that they will add in maybe a date if they're creating multiple invoices throughout the life cycle of that job. So that's always a good thing to think of as well. Now, the invoice date, this is one that I always kind of like to point out and kind of stress a little bit. The invoice date, especially if you are invoicing based off of time material and you only want to capture the time and material that was applied to that job within that time period. So if we're at the start of a job and then we create an invoice date, it will capture everything, say from if this job had been created on Jan 1, it will capture everything from Jan 1 to February 6th. Now, if what you're looking for is really to only capture everything from Jan 1 to January 31st, because we'll do another invoice in February from Feb 1 to Feb 28, what we'll want to do is just quickly backdate this so that those timesheets aren't captured. Now, of course, you'll have this little summary down here, and we can see that the 3 uninvoiced timesheets that were in there were applied within that January date range, which, of course, is a good thing to know. So we didn't end up accidentally grabbing anything within that time. Now, the calculated from, there are a few options in here. Of course, none will give you a blank invoice that you can choose to manipulate as you wish. Actuals, again, that will pull all that time material, so really where that invoice date is coming in key for you. the estimated, which is that original estimated amount that you had created when building the first estimate before turning it into a job. Now, the remainder from actuals and remainder from estimated are always a little bit interesting. So the functionality here, especially with the remainder from estimated, say if you're wanting to invoice 50% of your estimated amount halfway through the job and then the other half at the end, you can use this remainder from estimated in that way. So at this point, we could estimate for 50% of that estimated amount by just using the estimated option, and then at the end, if we want to make sure that we only capture the other 50%, you would use the remainder from estimated. So whatever value hadn't been used yet up to that point. And that, of course, will be with the actuals as well. Just for our example today, we're going to use estimated. And then, of course, billing percentage. So if you're wanting in that scenario I just spoke of to talk about billing percentages, we can, to apply just a billing percentage, at this point we could put in 50% and it would pull that. And then, of course, your taxes, which should all be set up in the back end of your system, and they'll choose the default based off of the company that you're invoicing for or whatever your tax default is. We're ready. We can just go ahead and add invoice. Yelena, I just want to check in. Have there been any questions yet that might be good to touch on screen? I know we've been doing a lot of definitions so far.
No, for now, we're good. Seems like people are just listening and enjoying.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. You're used to a lot of questions, so I'm glad to hear that it's calm for you right now. Okay, great. And now as we come into the invoice itself, again, pretty straightforward. This is just your invoice edit page. You'll see those estimated amounts where the actuals are at, that variance, and then of course those invoice amounts. Now, because we put it in for estimated of 50%, it's auto-populated it now to 1,000. However, if we wanted to get rid of that 50% and reset that, it will pull the estimated amount, which was that full 2,000. Now, of course, in this example, we're wanting to talk about all of our fixed price and our time material. So for this job, I actually want to go based off time material. So I'm going to switch this to actuals, and all of the actuals currently on there is about $1,600 that haven't been invoiced for. So this is something also, again, good to take note of. That $4,000 that's here, that is $4,000 that has been invoiced of actuals over the entire life cycle of the job. But what hasn't been invoiced up to this point is that $1,600. So we have about, 34 there that has been invoiced for already, or 24. If you ever need a review, of course, you can come in here. So these are all of those timesheets that are being captured for this specific invoice, totaling that $1,600. We can just go ahead and save that. Now, once you've created your invoices, you're going to have multiple options here for you. We have our notify client. So as long as you have a contact actually living against that job, you'll be able to choose them to email this invoice directly out of the system too. Now, if you're wanting to include a CC, that is a regularly asked question by us, you'll just need to make sure that they are labeled as a job contact. It's not necessarily that they're a contact at the company level. They'll need to be a contact on the job. And if they are, you'll be able to easily CC them in to then send it out. Now, if we want to take a look at the printout, we can also come up here and take a look at, say, this detailed invoice. Now, this is going to have a lot of information on it. Well, I guess it's a small job, so there isn't as much information, but you'll see that we'll be able to see what that service group was, as well as that service, and then that cost that we'll be invoicing out. Now, this, again, is a pretty simple invoice for you, but we can add in a lot more detail as long as that detail is living on the invoice and the job itself. Great. So that is really just a good high-level overview of invoicing in general. So let's dive into more of that time and material. So again, as you're invoicing for time material, that really is going to be based more around any timesheets or expenses that have been applied to those jobs during that time frame that you're wanting to invoice for. So, it's at that point of the month where we're wanting to send out all of our invoices for all of our time materials jobs. So what we would do is we would come in here to our job and find job. And in here, what you're going to notice is now this category field. So as long as, again, we're inputting all of our data correctly at the start of the workflow in regards to our estimates before turning them into jobs, you'll be able to easily search by all of our time material work. I'm going to find only the active ones. And this is all of the time and material jobs I have in here. So I can see that there are 14 jobs labeled for time material that I need to make sure I invoice for right now. Something else that you'll notice though is that with those statuses, I have those ones that are actually ready to invoice. So if I had wanted to, because these have been signified to me that they're ready to be invoiced, I can come in here again, switch that category to time material, and then actually choose the status of ready to invoice. So this would be a really good workflow for any of your accountants to come in, find those jobs, and then I actually have 3 that are ready to invoice. Now, what the system can do to make this a little bit easier for yourself is to actually invoice these in a batch invoice. Now, there's a couple ways of creating multiple invoices at a single time. What this one would be defined as in function point would be a batch invoice. So it will create single invoices for each of these jobs because they're all for different companies. Now, there are ways of being able to create sorry, bit of a dry mouth there. Easy ways to create multiple jobs for a single company as well, so that all jobs would show up on a single invoice. We'll go through that scenario in just a moment. So in this case, again, I'm now the accountant. I've come in, I've pulled all jobs that I know based off time material I need to invoice for, and I want to invoice for all of these at once. So I can actually come up here and add invoice. By default, the batch name will just pull that date. I know I want to leave everything open, and I want this calculated from actuals because I want to capture all of the expenses and timesheets living against it. This will then come into the batch information. So this is more just general information that you would want to apply against some of these, whatever accounts it is that you want it communicating to over into your QuickBooks. This should all be set up for you by default in the back end of your system. So I wouldn't normally go making any changes at this point, but of course, if there are, you do have that ability. Of course, adding in any description or payment notes, as well as you can set up default payment notes as well. So if you have a default just little blurb that you want to make sure is at the end of all of your invoices, you have that ability to just add in a default, or of course, create a unique one for that round of invoicing. When you're ready, we can just add jobs to the batch. So what this now allows, so as you were familiar on that last page, we had, or as we were creating a single invoice, we had the ability of editing all of those. So this is where this kind of comes in now. So this would be when we would actually go through and choose which jobs we want to make sure that we do invoice for. Now I know we had kind of filtered everything through on that first page, so it does allow us to come in here and just add all jobs for yourself. Now, if for some reason you wanted to quickly review everything, maybe you have a bit longer list than just the 3 here, you can go through and actually take a look at some of these plus buttons, and it will give you a little overview of what's been uninvoiced on that job. So for some of these, I see that I have 1 uninvoiced timesheet, so I need to make sure that's invoiced for. With here, I have 1 uninvoiced external expense, so I'm going to want to make sure that's invoiced for. And then with here, I have 3 uninvoiced timesheets as well as 1 uninvoiced external expense. So a nice little just grouping of time material that I'm going to want to make sure we invoice for. When we're ready, I'm just going to add all jobs. But of course, if you needed to remove any, you do have that ability through here. Now, with some of these, we can also come in and edit. And this will pop up that editing section that you were used to on that single invoice page for yourself. So since we're pulling based off of actuals, those are not editable, but say if we needed to invoice for an extra amount against research during that time, again, you have all of this editing ability. And then it would be as easy as finish adding to batch. And now you'll have this overview. By default, it will just show you the first invoice for yourself, but you do have the ability of coming into the batch and then clicking into those individual invoices as well for yourself. We still have the ability of notifying client, same capabilities as previously, making sure that you have that estimate contact, which will be the default contact that we want to make sure that we send off to. And then, of course, if you have anyone you want to CC, you'll just need to make sure that they are still a job contact to be included. With the printing, it will still also be those same printouts as what you were used to. So we can even come into the detailed. And again, it will just print that first one, but we can click through all of them individually to take a peek at some of those. Now, everything should be as you would expect, but you know, always best practice, give everything a little bit of a review before you send it off to your client. You know, just because human error can always occur, and we want to make sure that no revenue is lost. Great. Yelena, I do see some questions coming in. Is there anything that you feel like we should tackle on screen?
No, not for now, just tackling on this. But I will let you know if we need to do this for all.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for checking in. Great. So now the other way of batch invoicing that of course can be pretty important is that next example that I had given in regards to a single invoice for multiple jobs for a single client. So with that, we're able to come in, and again, I'm going to do another find job. We're going to do a category search of those time materials, find those active. Now I have one that's in here in a project, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to navigate to that original project. And we can actually take a look at all of the jobs in here. Now, of course, this one does only have one job, so maybe this isn't the best example. I'm going to quickly add in another job so that we can invoice for this. And again, we're wanting to make sure that all of this information is filled out as we can. It really is quite important, especially when it comes to that category. We're going to want to invoice for that time material. We're going to go for some expenses and everything in here. We're going to estimate for a few things in here. Okay, so Yelena's actually messaging me just saying that there's been some issues with some questions. So I'm going to quickly pop this out and make sure that okay, no, I think we're still okay in here. All right, we'll just add that. And then we're going to turn this into a job. And let's add some time against this so that we can quickly see it. 30359. And let's add some time against this. About in 10 hours. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to come back into this project details here. And what we're able to do is, again, we can come in, we can see those jobs. We have a couple of jobs in here with some actuals against them. I always recommend using this job financials page to do a bit of a review of where all of your estimated versus actuals are, because you can see now, especially with this POP display, that we had estimated for 85 hours, but our actuals now are at 94, 92. However, the example job that we've added in here, they were estimated at 20 hours, and we're currently at 10. So at this point in the job, we're wanting to make sure that everything so far has been invoiced for. So for this batch invoicing, you can come up here, or what we call our multi-job single invoice. You can come up to add new and add invoice. So this is going to create an invoice at that project level. Now, of course, as you're creating invoices at a project level, you do have the ability of adding in a deposit. Of course, for our example today, we're really just wanting to create that interim because we just want to capture all the time material up to this point with that single multi-job invoice. That invoice name will automatically just grab those job names for you, or the project names. If you want to add in a default contact, you have that ability. So maybe we'll just do that with Jason today. And then we want to make sure that we actually backdate this to only capture time. Actually, no, I want to capture time. Say it's the end of February. We're going to capture everything to the end of February. We're going to add that invoice. Again, same process here. We're automatically just pulling that name. All of our accounts receivables are entered in for us. We may want to enter in some payment notes for this point, and that will automatically pop up for you. When we're ready, we'll go ahead and add jobs to invoice. I want to capture all that has been done so far. And then we're ready. Just finish adding the invoice. And this will now bring this through. Now, here is where there is a little bit of a difference. So, of course, we have those jobs. They'll be labeled out for us. But instead of each job being on a single printout and, of course, being able to navigate through all of those, they'll now all be on both jobs will be on one invoice rather than two jobs on two separate printouts. So we can just do that print. And you will now be able to see those different jobs of the POP display with that $14,710 and the webinar example at $950, totaling that $16,599.60 that we plan on charging back to our client. Great. Okay, again, Jelena, just sort of checking in. These are really the main examples I wanted to share today. And, you know, just for everyone, I was really concentrating on that time and material piece when it comes to the invoicing. But of course, if you're wanting to concentrate more on that fixed price item, again, through that labeling of those estimates, utilizing that category to label which ones are fixed price. And then as you're creating your invoices, what I would recommend, because your fixed price, usually that is an agreed upon amount at the start, which would be that estimated amount you had discussed with your client and entered in at that point. So what you would do is, in the case of while creating your invoices, how you would change it just slightly is actually changing it to making sure you're invoicing based off of that estimated amount. So in this one, how we had created that, that was the 20 hours. And that would invoice for everything that you had originally estimated for, rather than just capturing the time and material that had been put against it. But ultimately, the process of creating your single invoices, creating those batch invoices, and creating the single multi-job invoices are the exact same. It's just changing it from estimated to actual values. So Jelena, just checking in again, any questions kind of coming through that we should tackle on screen? Or is there anything that you feel like I've forgotten today that I should make sure to show?
No, just listening carefully. I think you just walked us through all the good options we have in there for invoicing. Now for the questions, unfortunately, something's happening with my GoToMeeting and it's not pushing stuff towards me. So I would need to ask for questions to be forwarded by email so I can reply to them.
All right, sounds good. And you know, that's for everyone on the webinar right now. Yeah, it does look like our questions box doesn't seem to be working. So if you have sent any questions through, please feel free to email success@functionpoint.com. We want to make sure that we get all of those. And if it's not myself or Jelena directly answering you, it will be your team's designated customer success manager here at Function Point, who will be in touch. Of course, we are always here to help with any questions or concerns that you have about the system or your workflow. We want to guarantee that you are successful with the software. Now, of course, there are times where maybe you're reaching out and we may not be in the office. There are some time zones, many time zones that we work with. So if you ever get stuck, again, we always record these webinars. We have many user docs that are always great to utilize as well. And those can all be found up here through your information icon and the Help Center. And this will take you into our FP Help Center. So there are lots of items in here from our Function Point library. I know it's called a library. I almost want to call it an encyclopedia with the amount of information we have in there. So please feel free to use our search bar to narrow down your search. But we have grouped everything based off of modules within the system for your use. We do also have some crash courses, so those are based mostly on maybe what your function might be at your agency. Really great way of maybe pinpointing some documentation that you should take a peek at. What's new? So of course we did just release our BI reporting within the last, oh goodness, we did it back in December. So it's been very recent, but anytime there's anything new being released, you will see information up here for that. And then of course our webinars, you'll have the ability to either register for upcoming webinars or of course take a look at some of our previously recorded ones for you to be able to utilize for your learning. So go ahead and use this area. We do put a lot of work into it, and it really is a great resource to have. I still navigate here all the time as well to make sure I find the right documentation for some customers. And then, of course, if you have any great ideas on how you'd like to see the software in its growth, our growth team actually does want to hear directly from you. We have our submit an idea section here. They do their best to monitor and reply to everything coming through, and they really do enjoy talking directly with our customers to hear how you'd like to see the software developed over the coming months, years, just really your entire time here with Function Point. So please go ahead and submit. And if you don't even have anything to submit, go see what other people have submitted and vote on them, because that will just help in us knowing what are the most important things for us to prioritize as we continue to build our development roadmap. Okay, great. So again, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to our success team at success@functionpoint.com. We are here to help you with all your training and workflow needs. And we are coming up on the end of this webinar series in the next month or so. So if there are any topics that you would like us to touch on again in the future, please feel free to shoot those through, because we constantly sort of touch on the same items, but anything new that you would like to make sure that we do in the future, I'd love to hear about it. Okay. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and I hope you all enjoy a lovely Wednesday. And thank you again, Yelena, for joining me today. It was absolutely lovely having you on here.
Thank you, Sophie, and everybody that attended.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.